it does take a bit of courage to listen to someone's critique and then to analyze it and learn from it and work out what you do better with it.
Yep.
Welcome to the Passivhaus podcast, brought to you by Passivhaus Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration and connections from all flavours of Passivhaus, check out passivhausaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passivhaus journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passivhaus Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passivhaus podcast. G'day and welcome back to the Passivhaus podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler, coming to you from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland in New Zealand. In this special episode, I'm bringing you a compilation of voices from the recent Thrive Passivhaus Conference held in Melbourne. The day after the conference, I had the chance to visit one of Melbourne's outstanding Passivhaus projects, the Burnonite Cultural Centre on Phillip Island, about 2 hours south of Melbourne City. I took the chance to catch up with some of the speakers and attendees of the conference. So what follows is their reflections on the event, the progress and challenges for Passivhaus in Australia, and what's inspiring them right now in the world of building science, design and sustainability. Before we get started, I'd like to thank all our supporters over at the Passivhaus Accelerator. Firstly, our stakeholder partner, Certifiers, and our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwool and Zola Windows. And thanks very much to our champion sponsors, Buizo, Cascadia, European Architectural Supply, Thacro, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, LG, and Source 2050. And an extra special thanks to Cascadia Windows and Doors, who are our sponsor of the week this week. We start with Alex Slater, who is the founder of Building Physics Australia, where he combines deep technical expertise with a passion for climate-responsive design. With a background in engineering and years of experience in thermal and hygrothermal simulation, Alex is committed to improving building performance across Australia's diverse climates. His work supports architects, builders and certifiers in delivering Passivhaus and low-energy buildings that excel in comfort and resilience. How was the conference for you?
Conference was very enlightening. I felt there was a lot more where we're trying to look at more meaningful things. We're trying to not advertise based on cost, but value. Yep. So I felt that was a really good theme that came through. Yep. I felt that the forums and the actual understanding of compliance and legalese and all this was a cool thing to also demonstrate, so that we actually get our message clear and then we're protected as an industry as well. So I thought that was great.
Did you notice any change? You've been to a few Passivhaus conferences now, presented a few. Did you notice some changes this time around?
Changes? Yeah, I really liked that the trade show was right near the auditorium. Thought that was a good move. It was a bit hard to see some stalls, but overall it was fine.
And what about in terms of content?
Content. Yeah, more visual. Quite a number of international presentations, and I felt that was quite good in many ways. I felt also that it might be a bit hard to gauge the kind of level the Australian industry is at versus where people are in other countries. Yeah. So that was a bit of a gap for me. Yep. And then because of that gap, maybe there was some messages that were said too many times or a little bit more than
right. Yeah. And you presented this time. What, for those that missed it or weren't able to make it here, what was the main message that you were presenting?
The main message was keeping in balance. So the title of the presentation was defrag the design before you optimize Windows.
And what do you mean by defrag?
So defrag is simplify accessing more of nature's resources. So in a Windows hard drive, when you defrag, you're moving the bits around so that they actually line up and the information is more easily read.
Right.
And in terms of optimize, I corrected myself in my presentation is about before upgrading the Windows. So before defaulting to, let's just make the Windows a higher spec, work on where else you can do things.
Yeah.
And that ended up showing that it's easier to produce a harmony, because when you reduce or change a window size, there's always a trade-off and a benefit.
Yeah.
And so the trade-off and benefit I found was there was an slight increase in heating load, but quite a large increase in cooling load in the climate zone I was working in, which was Melbourne.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed there was quite a few other presentations that also went quite deep and quite analytical this time, including looking at we've been also talking about how to communicate the message of Passivhaus and some of the metrics. What were your thoughts about some of those other presentations, looking at not just the analytics of Passivhaus, but how to communicate it?
Yeah, communication is key for me, and I think last year's presentation also directed that. I feel sometimes that it's really hard to communicate things using numbers and tables and spreadsheets, and it's much easier to get in the motive or something along the lines of that. So I felt there was some presentations which were really, really complicated in terms of understanding what's going on, and others which got the message through. Like you leave the calcs to the professionals, understand the message, act on the message, and then it's an outcomes based argument, rather than you can calculate it yourself argument. And I felt that worked really well.
And how are you going in business? How do you see the market here in Australia for Passivhaus?
Number of inquiries, probably, I'd say 3 of the 4 weeks in a month, I'm doing a Passivhaus analysis. Yeah. So maybe about 36 a year. Yeah. And they're not all certification. So it's building physics analysis, with the intent someone to move to Passivhaus certification, but a lot of them want to look at how they can optimize their design.
And you just remind people, because your work's a little bit different. You're not you don't work typically as an architect. You're doing more analysis, just doing PHPP. Well, not just, but you're doing PHPP for other architects. Who is your client?
Varies. A lot of builders, private clients, and architects.
Right.
Yeah, and building designers, and so
when
it varies.
When it's clients, do they get it? Like, do they understand all the intricacies and understand about air tightness and some of the metrics, kilowatt hours per square meter, those sorts of things, or do you have to do a lot of education as well?
More often than not, they're bringing their architects along.
Right.
Yeah. So
that's good.
Well, they're builders. Or the builder's bringing the architect, or the architect's bringing the builder, or there's one player in the team that wants the others to know about something.
Right.
It's typically what I've found. So, I mean, in terms of understanding the metrics, it's a very learned community. Yeah. And I think as we move further into bigger market, I guess, then there will be more of an issue about what people do know.
Yeah.
So it's quite easy. People do it because they understand the reason for it, and I'm happy to work with that. But we're going to have to work out strategies and communication tools to allow those that may not necessarily get it but want a healthy home or want a health standard for their buildings to understand what that means. Yeah.
And just finally, just coming back from a site tour, community house or community building Passivhaus. Any thoughts on that project?
I think public buildings are great for Passivhaus. Homes are where we spend most of our time, but public buildings would be the next.
Any particular features of that one that you liked or thought could have been done better?
I felt quite cold for Passivhaus through it. That was a bit bizarre. I wonder if the overheating was looked in too much. I don't know.
Right.
Or overbalanced. I think that there's a lot of ideas going on in that building from an architecture point of view. Yeah. But it was quite homogeneous in terms of its formed from the outside, and quite well centered in terms of where windows are placed. I think multi-purpose is hard to do, and that was probably pulled off quite well.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
Oh, in Melbourne. Give me a call.
Just look for Alex in Melbourne.
Yeah, you're right. Building Physics. Yeah. Building Physics Australia. It often comes up on Google.
Right.
So yeah, cool. That's cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew.
Next up, we have Elrond Burrell. Elrond is the director at Via Architecture, a specialist firm known for designing low-carbon, high-performance buildings. A seasoned advocate for Passive House in Australia and New Zealand and abroad, Elrond brings over 2 decades of international experience, particularly in large-scale public and residential projects. He's a vocal thought leader on sustainable architecture and a mentor to many in the built environment sector.
Elrond Burrell, Senior Lecturer of Architecture at Victoria University of Wellington and Director of Via Architecture, Architect and Passivhaus Designer.
So that first one, that's a fairly new role for you. How's it been going?
Yep, so started working at the university at the end of last year, so been teaching for 1 trimester. It's going good, I think. It's been an interesting transition from a different type of job from what I'm used to doing, and it takes quite a lot of energy, but it's really good to interact. I really enjoy interacting and working with students and seeing them sort of develop their thinking and understanding.
Do you find it kind of strange, because in this Passive House world, everyone knows who Elrond is, but I'm guessing your students don't know who you are?
Yeah, it's quite different in that sense. Yep, and from the students' point of view, I'm just a new lecturer at the university that they've never met before. And but I did, when I introduced myself to students at the start of the course, I mentioned that I'd specialised in Passive House for quite a long time as an architect, and I did get questions and interest from the students around that. They wanted to know more about what that meant, so that was good.
Have they mostly not heard of Passive House before? Is it something completely new?
For most of them, I think, yeah, it's completely new, but in the same way, in the sense that they haven't really heard about any kind of building standards or anything other than that. You know, they're quite young. They just come out of high school, come to university, and been learning. And they're 3rd-year students I've been teaching, and at that stage, unless they've deliberately sorted out, they probably haven't really been exposed to anything particularly about sustainable construction or energy efficiency beyond the kind of basics of things.
Yeah. You probably lost count of how many Passive House conferences you've been to over the years. What were your thoughts on this one you've just finished?
Yeah, I've been to a few. Been to a few in Australia, and I think that all the Australian ones I've been to have been very successful conferences in my mind, and I think this is another one which is very successful. I think it's been a really good mix of inspiration and kind of practical lessons and sharing from projects and people's experiences, and the sort of similar discussions we're having in New Zealand at the moment, I guess, about how do you communicate Passive as well and effectively to help bring people along on that journey, and seeing what sort of new projects are and where people are getting to at the moment. So yeah, it's good variety from that point of view. And as always with the conference, really some of the best parts, of course, is hanging out with people and chatting and hearing what they're up to and what struggles they've got and how things are the same and how things are different and what's going on. So yeah, it's been really good.
So main takeaways?
I would have to dig through my notes to find if I got any kind of main takeaways.
For me, there seemed to be a bit more on deep dive into analytics and some thoughts around how we communicate some of the metrics and or different metrics, and also and along that same theme of thinking about how we communicate Passive House seemed to be something that people are grappling with.
Yeah, definitely around the communication. That's been quite interesting, and the Australian Passive House Association has just recently put out their guide on how to claim the Passive House standard, which is based on what we did in New Zealand and what we'd based on the UK one. So they're obviously at a similar point to where we were a little while ago, where people are starting to make claims which aren't accurate about projects that are not Passive House, calling them Passive House and so on.
Yeah.
The analytics stuff was, that was interesting. Like, How do you verify a building to make sure it is Passive House or is performing as you expect is a big technical challenging task. And I think although the people that were presenting on that were hoping to come up with some more simplified ways of doing it, I'm not sure I was convinced in the end that it was that much more simple. Or
I would have lost like the second or third one.
Yeah. So, but that's an interesting thing about And I think that came out in a couple of other presentations too, in that although we talk about Passivhaus not having a performance gap, so, typical buildings often energy performance and comfort performance are way worse than they might have expected. And Passivhaus, often it's very close to what we're predicting and what we're expecting, but people are still finding a gap, particularly now between summer conditions, so overheating or cooling demand side of things. And I think that's kind of reflective of the evolution of people implementing Passivhaus, and particularly in climates which do tend more towards overheating, like Australia and New Zealand. So yeah, it's good to see people grappling with that kind of stuff, and I think that's really important. And hopefully, we'll see people come up with better solutions for it. I think that was, in terms of takeaways, actually, that reminds me, that was one of the things I did get from Pablo's talk, was about where he was looking at the heat island effect and the climate getting warmer, or the weather getting warmer. So how do you kind of design and build more resilient for those situations? And one thing he pointed out is that putting in nature-based solutions, so tree planting in urban spaces and things, is quite good for a small response at a certain level, but once you get above the tree canopy, there's no effect. And of course, in dense cities, once you're above like 2 stories, which, like especially in Melbourne where we've been, a lot of the apartment buildings are much taller than 2 stories, and so the vast majority of the building is not having any positive impact by that tree. The tree planting at ground level, it's good for shops and good for people walking on the streets, of course, which is great.
And quite significant too. There was like degrees of change between in that modelling.
Yeah, I think he did. Well, my understanding of what he showed was that the change wasn't as much as sometimes claimed, but it's still measurably different and better. So that was interesting. And it's like, I think, and I asked the question of the people presenting the model build to rent stuff, what were they planning in terms of resilience? Because it's all, relatively within the realm of what we know and can do to deal with a slightly warming climate. But with the change in climate, we get, more extreme heat waves and other situations like that. And I don't know quite what the solution for those things is yet. And I'm not sure other people do either, because you can't really design for the worst case extreme for everything. You've got to kind of mainly design for what the average conditions are going to be most of the time. But yeah, I think, that's like resilience for heat waves is going to be a tricky one, because it's maybe with lots of solar panels and lots of cooling, we can deal with that kind of thing, but that's not going to work everywhere.
Well, that seemed to be a feature of this building that we've just visited here in Phillip Island, that the modelling showed that there was a bit of a balance between the keeping cool in summer and keeping winter, and in fact they went more towards keeping it cool than they would otherwise have done, to get that, optimize that balance. Was that how you interpreted that?
It certainly seemed that way. Like, there's quite a strong emphasis on good shading and checking the shading was going to work for all situations. So yeah, I think that was right. I do think, like, if you observe just typical buildings around Melbourne and that, there is, and other parts of Australia too, there's definitely an understanding and an attention to shading buildings and to making sure that is part of the approach, and it's not like something you have to add on later on. Yeah. And so, there's a lot of good competence and well done sort of architectural responses to shading, rather than having to bandage something on later or whatever. But it's hard to know how far they've gone with that in terms of what climate situations might come later, and how are we going to deal with that kind of stuff is going to be challenging.
Look forward to Passivhaus Conference coming up in Christchurch in New Zealand. Any things you might implement from that, or thoughts you might carry over to that conference?
Good question. There's some commonalities already, which are maybe that's a developing theme in a way, is that we had here in Australia, we had Rachel Rose, who's from New Zealand, presenting about Passivhaus with straw bale and other natural materials like clay plasters and things. And so the Christchurch conference, or Hui, which is at the end of July, is going to have at least one presentation about straw bale Passivhaus building as well, with a local project there being presented. Slightly different to what they've done in Australia that we're going to be doing, which people at the conference at Australia I was talking to talked about doing pizza kuchas, but they didn't do one at this conference. But they talked about how effective they were, and we're planning to have a pizza kucha in the Christchurch conference, with the idea being that we can have designers presenting certified buildings from different climate zones across New Zealand to show what the commonalities and what the differences are and respond to those climate zones.
Short, sharp presentation.
Yeah, short, sharp presentations. Keep it rolling, keep it going fast. Those are always good fun. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think the Australian conference and what we're doing this year in New Zealand are quite different scale of events, so kind of different approach. I mean, there's other commonalities, I guess, because they had workshops before the conference where people could do actual taping up to make things airtight and things like that. And we've got some workshops going on before the conference in Christchurch too. And during the conference, there'll be some workshops with suppliers. There's definitely a ventilation one. I can't remember what the other ones are, but there's enough workshops going on. So a bit of hands-on stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ben Sinclair is co-founder of Basehouse, a firm focused on delivering energy-efficient, beautiful buildings through passive house design. With a background in carpentry and design, Ben is hands-on in every aspect of the building process. He champions a practical, collaborative approach that blends craft and performance to create healthier, smarter buildings.
So my name's Ben Sinclair from a company called Basehouse, based on the Gold Coast. Done the last, this will be my third conference, did Sydney. First one 2 years ago, in Melbourne last year, and Melbourne again this year. I think there's a good mix of inspirational stories, which some of the audience need. I think there's a good mix of, there's more projects being, I guess, more projects that have come online which get exposure through the conferences, which is also good for inspiration.
Yeah.
Some of the things, at any of the conferences, there's always going to be stuff that's relevant to some people and not relevant to other people and stuff. But I think the association's done a good job to get a good mix. For me personally, and what we're doing in our field, it's probably a little bit, we're doing stuff that's left of field, so and cutting edge, and that's probably a little bit too. At these sort of conferences, you can't get too technical and crazy because you'll lose the audience.
Quite a few people do.
This is true. Yeah. This is true. But yeah, I mean, for me, it would be the technical stuff's the more interesting thing, I guess. And maybe this is just a sign of where Passive House is at in Australia. And it is changing, but there's always a lot of talk of doing stuff and not necessarily people actually doing stuff. Yeah. But, someone like Rory is more talking and doing, and who are the other guys that are doing model and
right at the start, and
Yes.
Matt and I can't remember the names either, but the very first presentation.
David Matt. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's more. There is.
I mean, that's sort of commercial, but with pretty motivated clients.
Yes.
You've got a background that is more business, property and commercial orientated. Do you think that we in the Passive House community are doing a good job of selling Passive House?
I think in the last 12, 18 months, the professionalism and the, I guess, outward-facing side of the organisation, I think they've done a really good job in branding, marketing. I think that it's a little bit, it feels more accessible because there seems to be more stuff going on in a greater number of locations. And I think the organisation's done a pretty good job at communicating that, and just even their messaging and the look and the feel of the organisation, all that sort of stuff makes it look and feel professional. And that's not saying anything bad about what was happening before, but when you compare yourself to some of the other organisations in other countries, they can feel a little bit Windows 95, right? Whereas I feel like there's a it's clean and tidy, and that just helps present the message to people that haven't been involved in the industry in a clear and simple way about what's going on and that sort of stuff. So, look, I think they have. I think there probably needs to be a little bit more of a balance to help some of the members on a technical side.
Right.
But that's a constant seesaw that's sort of going back and forth. So yeah, but no, I think generally speaking, like the push, there's always more things that they can do, but I think that they're finding a good balance between trying to appeal directly to consumers, mums and dads, and talking to people at more government kind of levels.
Yeah.
I definitely think that there's, from doing my commercial build, I think the whole entire passive house world is missing a trick when it comes to commercial stuff. But you've only got so many resources, you can only push so much stuff. So I think they're probably doing the right thing in terms of trying to, at the moment, especially in Australia, housing crisis, let's, leverage off of that conversation as much as possible. And then, I was hoping that maybe the whole 2050 decarbonisation goals might have been a good thing from the commercial space in terms of pushing passive house, because they've got now other motivators, carrots and sticks in reducing their carbon emissions. But I'm not totally sure where that's all at now that Trump is lobbing his hand grenades. And look, I think generally people think it's still happening and people are still trying to report on it, but I think it's a slower burn. But I feel like, if you push the housing now, good, because housing crisis and lots of conversations around it. And then as long as you had this plan to progress into the commercial space as housing cools off, then I feel like then you've got another audience to open up the conversation with that's got a real need that they will start getting hit with a stick with if they don't do something about it. So
you've got the commercial property, which is passive house, in a warm, almost, was it tropical, pretty warm, humid conditions.
Yes.
You've had tenants in there for a while, commercial tenants. How's it going?
90% positive, and the 10% that wasn't positive, we've had to do some modifications to the building. Generally speaking, the tenant that's been in there, very demanding, highly aware and very vocal, which has been very, very helpful for us ironing out any bugs within the building and stress testing the building, ridiculously stress testing the building, which has also been good because for the most part, their complaints have been either easy to fix or something that actually didn't have anything to do with the building.
Are they temperature related or internal conditions?
Yes, definitely. Amongst heaps of other bits and pieces, but yes. And from the time that we built it, which we completed in 2021, the last 3 years of climate data or climatic conditions on the Gold Coast would not have existed in the 30 years of climate data that we use to actually on the building.
So what, warmer?
Yeah, like 38 degrees, 90% humidity, and not just one day, but a series of days. And so that stress testing, I think it's probably just highlighted passive house in general. It's so fine-tuned that there probably needs to be, and there is more thought around it now, but obviously when we started designing, that was back in 2017. So again, more infancy in the industry, but I think the importance of stress testing the building.
But that also, there's a couple of things there. That means that the climate has changed a lot in that 8 years since you started doing the design, and there probably needs to be more margin of error or more capacity to address overheating. And is it humidity as well, or is it mostly overheating?
Well, for our climate zone, that goes hand in hand. Yeah. So, and a lot of times it's actually the humidity that the tenants don't realise it, but they think it's just too hot, but it's actually a humidity problem.
Right.
The other thing is the way in which they're actually using the building. And again, this might be tenant specific, but it's good to know they open and close doors way more than what typical office use would do.
Right.
They don't come to work and just sit down and work inside and go outside once in a day. They're, movie industry, so they're out on site, they're back, they're going from one department to another department, they're walking downstairs, they're on the phone, like it's chaos. and that chaos it's not 9 to 5, it's chaos from 6 till 10.
Right.
You know what I mean? So this, and it was never when we designed the building, we never thought, the movie industry, what's their needs? We were like, okay, office space, what's their needs? And so when the movie people moved in, we're like, oh yeah, office space. And then once we actually saw how they use it, it's like, okay, these people are like mental, and even I think, on one of those days where it's 38 degrees and 90% humidity, they call me up and they say aircon's not working, and I go out there and they're telling me it's too hot, but they're working in jeans and a long sleeve shirt inside. And it's like, well, I don't know, like, but I think the learning out of it is if it's your own house, your tolerance level is much higher than if you're a tenant and you're paying money, especially commercial, right? Because you're forking out money, right? So you expect that what you're paying for is going to work because you've told it works, and it's not working, right? And now, if it's not working because of some of your own actions with wearing jeans and long sleeve shirt on that sort of day, but the expectation of tenants, and I won't use the word occupants because it's not about people in their own house, but tenants and someone paying for a space, they hop in their car and they can blast the aircon in a car. You could be 40 degrees outside and you could wear a jumper in your car and be okay, right? So, and then you go to a shopping centre and like it's cold enough that you could wear a jumper inside there. And then you can go into your house and enough people have enough air conditioning in the house. They can probably do the same thing. So when they come to work, their expectation is like, I can do the same thing. So I think there's been a change of expectations around thermal comfort, and it's been driven by the accessibility of air conditioning, especially for us in hot humid climates, and being able to this over specification of I guess of air conditioning even in your car, which allows you to create unrealistic controlled environments, So anyway, look, it was an easy fix. We installed more air conditioning. Right. Is that what I want to do? Not really, but we're still installed about the total capacity of air conditioning in the space is still probably a third of what you would typically install, right? So it's still a huge result, and the extra capacity we've installed is only about dealing with those peak days. And those peak loads are happening, maybe let's call it 10 to 20 days a year, but it's worth it so that I don't get phone calls and complaints from the tenant, right? So, but if it was, 100%. But if it was your own house, could you deal with that? Well, maybe, because you wouldn't be wearing jeans and a long sleeve shirt, right? So, there's a commercial reality rather than a problem with the actual standard or implementation of the Passivhaus bit. So, so anyway, there's, and I think that there's some other people that have built public space Passivhaus stuff that had similar sort of experiences, but people not necessarily using it in a logical way. And previous buildings have been built to deal with that by just massively over-specifying everything. And that's what we're trying to get away from. But the pain point is that you may not necessarily under-specify, but you're under-specifying for people's unrealistic expectations, right? So, anyway.
Sounds like some good lessons there. But like you said at the start, 90% successful, which is not to also be underestimated. Are you going to do it again?
In a much more scalable and repeatable way, not custom one-off stuff, because it's such a process, and it's not to say that those projects aren't worthwhile, but for us, we're interested in major impact. It's not necessarily about leaving a legacy, but it's about scale, because scale has real world impact. And it's hard to do that on large single custom jobs. So our focus is still very much on Passivhaus and its performance and all that sort of stuff. It's about taking technology to turn that into something that's scalable and repeatable, cost effective, and that can just you get to that volume point where you actually start making a difference. So it's easier to do that in the residential place or marketplace, because everyone needs 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, right? In the commercial world, things are a lot more custom and unique, but that is not to say that there isn't a place for something that is scalable and repeatable. And I think it's more in the commercial space, building workflows and logic that's scalable, so that you can handle custom jobs quicker and easier and faster. So there's a few different angles to it, but we're sort of focusing back on the residential space to get that scale and repeatability going, and then down the future there might be an opportunity to put it back into the more commercial world.
Look forward to seeing progress.
Yeah, cool, man. Appreciate
Thank
it.
Kylie Mills is a sustainability advocate and director at Blue Cube Architecture, with a mission to create homes and buildings that are people-focused and future-ready. Her work centres on promoting healthier indoor environments and low-impact living, drawing on both Passivhaus and broader sustainability frameworks. Kylie is a regular speaker and educator in the field of regenerative and sustainable design.
I'm a registered architect and a certified Passivhaus designer. I have won an award for building a certified Passivhaus to the classic standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a teacher?
I do.
Still call yourself a teacher?
An educator, I'd like to think. Yeah, an educator. Yes. I do some educating. No, a tutorial teacher at University of Sydney.
Yeah.
I have just recently done a stint at UNSW as well. And I do teach the Certified Passivhaus Designer course for AFA.
And you've been pretty heavily involved in AFA in the past?
I have, for many years, actually, since I discovered Passivhaus.
When was that?
2015. I did the course then. I discovered it before then, but I enrolled in doing the course at Box Hill TAFE back then.
No.
Yeah.
How would you sum up the conference for you?
Very different to last year.
Yeah.
The theme was more about well-being and achieving a standard that is still Passivhaus, but talking about it differently.
Yeah.
And literally framing it how I sort of started trying to get people to think about last year.
Right.
My presentation last year was about selling the message without misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. So,
How do you think we're going with that?
slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's still a lot of people out there that don't know.
Well, do you think we've... but do you think we've got the language right yet?
Oh, I think language is complex.
Yeah.
Yeah, very complex. And I'm saying that from a point of view of being a UIA member that's on a social habitat committee. And around the world, they've had the manifesto that they produced 3 years ago, transferred into 17 different languages. And you have to be very careful with language. So I think we are a very multicultural country here. The message has to be about comfort and wellness and people, because we buy on emotions. That was actually covered in the conference very well. So tick. That's how shopping malls were created for women, because they held the purse strings and all the history of that type of stuff, and knowing who you're marketing to.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what we're learning is who is our audience and who is actually making those decisions to get into Passivhaus, and what do they want out of that.
Yeah.
So if it's their wellness and well-being, everyone has somebody that has allergies or asthma, all those respiratory things we don't want.
Yeah.
So that's where our market should be. We should be sort of focusing on the good things that we can achieve out of eliminating, because that has a knock-on effect for our literally society, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Less burden on our health system, better education systems if they're passive house. Yeah. So children can learn better, more attentive, maybe better humans.
Yeah.
It's good for the future. It's good for everybody.
Were there some favourite presentations or highlights that you had?
Ooh. Being MC on the first day, that was really complex.
Yeah.
So, yeah, between knowing what I'm saying next, what was being delivered, I made lots of notes.
Yeah.
I took away lots of things. And I think I like the big models, knowing that there is big stuff happening, as in like large construction, not just resi stuff. For me, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people, my opinion, there's a lot of people now doing a lot of residential type stuff, small scale, so class 1 type buildings. I'm getting passionate about creating homes for people that don't necessarily have lots of money to build their own home, but live in apartments. They're the ones that should be living in low energy buildings that are comfortable, happy, healthy places to be as well.
Yeah.
So
I quite enjoy listening to people at that design phase. Some of those big apartment buildings, I think one of them mentioned it was going to be the biggest passive house building in Australia. And I quite like the fact that we're able to hear about those stories in the design phase, because they're going to be years into the future before they're built.
Didn't they say 2 years? 2 years before? Oh, that was the build to rent.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because otherwise, I think there's been a tendency in the part, to wait until something's finished and certified and all ticked off before we talk about it. And I'm really keen on hearing about what's going on in the design phase, because that's when all the important decisions are getting made.
Yes. Yeah.
Were there some other sort of key takeaways or anything that you found that you might change the way you're doing things?
Oh, based on the fact that a lot of my work is now remediation of apartment buildings.
Right.
It's about educating people to know that you can have better solutions for this. So one step at a time. It's what do you look at that they can change that's affordable, and knowing how a strata has to actually obtain money to do stuff.
Yeah.
So very much been talking to Lyndon and Alex, and they're based on the information that was presented last year, developing that to the next phase. So there'll be maybe another presentation next time, this conference. Just starting conversations with people that are outside of the construction world.
Yeah.
Pretty much like financiers and banks and investors, kind of like what Model's doing now to get their high-rise buildings going. This is more of let's get a small-scale strata on board where we can actually make change and get it retrofitted.
Yeah.
That's a cool goal. So I'm on board with them to do that.
Just coming back from a field trip to a community building, Passive House, what were your thoughts there?
I love the bricks. I'm in love with the bricks.
Yeah.
Beautiful flat bricks with, being installed with architectural details. So took some great photos. Very happy about that. Comfortable.
Yeah.
Interesting that we went to the room that felt the coldest.
Yeah. A couple of people mentioned that.
Yeah, it felt.
It was what time was? I guess it was 10 by the time 10:30.
Yeah, around 10:30, 11.
Yeah.
Between that time. So I did put my jumper back on.
Yeah.
I'm sitting on the bus, walked outside and got in. The shaded side of the building was very cold.
Yeah.
But yes, going into the building, it was comfortable.
Yeah.
And it was interesting chatting to the ladies at the information desk.
Right.
I said, what's it like working in here where you can come in here and wear a T-shirt literally all day? And they both looked at me and said, yeah, it's really nice. I said, so do you ever forget your jumper when you have to go home? They go, yeah, you have to come back and get it. But they said it's really nice place to work. And that was nice to sort of hear that. And then they were sort of telling me about the columns in the main entryway, which was the design.
Yeah.
Said it's supposed to represent a jetty.
Right.
And the pillars of a jetty. And I said, I looked at and I thought, I'm not quite seeing that. And then somebody had actually commented on the sculpture that was hanging, the blue sculpture.
Yeah.
And it was kind of representative of some kind of mammal. I'm not sure which one. But it was blue and glass and what have you hanging from the ceiling. And I said, so that's like a fish or something. And they said, yeah, now you've got it. I said, it's more like under the jetty. And they go, yeah, under the jetty. Yeah. So the feeling of the big,
on each side.
yeah. And then they said the materials of the bench had been chosen from local stone and honed. So they weren't polished. The edges were polished,
Right.
but the surfaces were actually rough.
Yeah.
And they're actually quite warm to touch.
Yeah.
So they weren't cold and uncomfortable. And that was placed around. So the natural materials, I love the CRT.
Yeah.
I love the joints when we're staying there looking at those joints and sort of musing about how they'd maintain some of those things that might happen.
Yeah.
How
I also like the fact that it's Saturday morning and there were people there, like normal people, not Passivhaus people.
Yes, they were using the community centre as a community centre. And no,
It's only a small, I don't know how the size of that is, but I think it's only a small community, but there was a reasonable number of people in there for Saturday morning.
and to be told that we couldn't use the theatre because they were doing a film or something later in the afternoon. Yeah, so it's given the community something, which is awesome. The best part for me was coming out of the cultural area where all the paintings were, and a couple had been sitting on the chair going, oh, yes, yeah, and we're waiting for you here at the cultural centre end, blah, blah, blah. And they'd gone in to have a look at the artwork that was on the wall and to hear an exclamation of somebody going, oh, this one looks like art.
Doing its job very well. Yeah.
And I thought that there is a lot of art in there, whether or not they thought it was art. But
Right.
no, it was nice to see that they've embraced the community.
Yeah.
They've taken on board all the things that were there as well.
Yeah.
Like the whole area.
Yeah.
I'd love to know a little bit more about, and I guess I'd probably have to look into the architect side of it, about the selection of the materials. And we were in a green room.
Yeah.
Literally. And what was the theory about all that being green? Is green just there because it's calming, or is it significant of the grasses in the area? But I wanted to know a little bit more about that connection.
Yeah.
But those skylights,
Skylight's pretty cool.
they were amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a lot of thought gone into the sun and the movement.
Yeah.
So,
Those photos.
Yeah.
I was the only person that laid on the floor, right?
probably. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Talk to you next year.
You will.
Elena Kazaka is the director of Avisa, a specialist provider of SIPs and high-performance building systems for Passivhaus and beyond. With a strong focus on prefabrication and building envelope innovation, Elena is at the forefront of the shift towards smarter, faster and more sustainable construction in Australia. She's a passionate advocate for Passivhaus education and systems-based thinking.
Elena is my name. I represent Avisa, the founder and managing director of this company. And we focus on architecture and residential projects, from standalone homes to medium density homes delivered with structural insulated panels.
And tell us more about the SIPs that you're working with.
The SIPs that we're working with are made with 2 layers of OSB, oriented strand board, and the insulating core is created essentially through by combining EPS with graphite. So the product is called Neopore. It's essentially a graphite-infused EPS core. And the 3 materials are essentially laminated together on both sides with adhesive.
And what's the purpose of the graphite?
The purpose of the graphite is to enhance the thermal performance of the insulation. So it slows down the thermal transfer through the insulation, but also helps with the flame retardancy. So the chemical component that they used to add into the white EPS has got a lower carbon intensity when compared to the one that Neopore has.
Right.
I would not know all the technical chemical data, but I can share them.
Yeah.
And
is this something that you've developed here in Australia, or is it being used elsewhere?
It's not necessarily a new product in Australia. It's been around for many decades in North America and Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the first SIPs that the SIP formula that was invented in North America is as old as 1980s or thereabout. So it's quite a fairly old product, but it hasn't taken, I suppose, been very, very popular in Australia. It has been popular in America and Europe. In Australia, as far as I know, it's only been, the SIPs have only started to be utilised in residential construction 10, 15 years ago.
So one of the concerns that a lot of people have is around the embodied carbon and the sort of chemicals in SIPs. What are you doing in that space? Or do you hear that from people?
That's a great question. We get often asked about the life cycle assessment of structurally insulated panels. So 2 years ago, we started a research and development program with Melbourne University. And one of the part of the program is to complete a full life cycle assessment for our product. So we've recently presented a life cycle assessment results at the Thrive Conference in Melbourne, and we are on the path of hopefully trying to make SIPs circular. Currently, structurally insulated panels are not easy to be recycled or repurposed. It takes quite a substantial amount of energy to put them back into use as soon as they've reached their end of life. So life cycle assessment is essentially the first point where you would start trying to determine which are the areas that make a product carbon intensive. So in our instance, the raw materials are the ones that are quite heavily in carbon. They're not, I suppose, in the carbon pyramid. I would probably say that we are somewhere in the middle. And the preliminary results show 42.5 kilograms of carbon per square meter of panel. That is an average. And we're, hopefully, through further research, we'll be able to reduce and, try to substitute those materials to reduce the carbon even further.
What does that number relate to other similar building systems? So how does 42 kilograms per square meter stack up?
Yeah, we only have preliminary data, so we're fairly confident that the carbon intensity of a SIPS dwelling only take about 10% of the overall carbon intensity of a dwelling, but we will have more accurate data in the next few months available. So at the moment, only through preliminary research, we kind of take, if a dwelling of 200 square meter that has quite a high energy efficiency, it performs quite a high energy efficiency level, would be around 1.2 tons of carbon per square meter. SIP would take about 10% out of that.
And where are you hoping to go from there? You're looking at other options for bringing that down further?
Definitely. So this is a 4-year R&D program that we are currently enrolled with at Melbourne University, and it's finishing in 2016. So we've got 4 main areas of focus, so engineering testing, fire testing, life cycle assessment, and the 4th one is to find an insulating material that can be recyclable, essentially. So once we are probably nearly there. The recipe exists. How commercial viable that product is, we don't know yet, but at least there's a formula and there's a start somewhere. And if there's enough interest, and we're able to achieve mass adoption, the product will essentially become more and more affordable.
Right. And you're still looking at foams? Is that the basis will still be foams?
One of the alternative is a bio-based foam, not a fossil fuel foam. And the other one is a mycelium insulation core. Both of them are biodegradable materials. It does require further testing to determine how stable they are with a long-term use within the building fabric.
Because I guess biodegradable is a double-edged sword, because that's what you want at end of life, but you don't want the end of life to come before too soon.
That's spot on. So a lot of the biodegradable material, they're great because they have such a low carbon footprint, but they don't last very long, or they can start to biodegrade before you want them to biodegrade. So the beauty of a synthetic product is that it kind of lasts forever. The only product is that it can last for a very, very long period of time, and in the hundreds of years you have all this problem where you kind of reach the end of life, and you have to find a solution to recycle it. So when we get to that point, we want to be able to essentially disassemble the structural insulated panel and take the components apart and repurpose them separately. MDI is one of the bio-based foam that has 60% from memory, 60% bio-based oil in its composition, and it can be recycled up to 5 or 6 times. Wow. So essentially that's, pushing the end of life, further away from us, but it's still not a product that can be recycled 1,000 times. Yeah. So it's got a limited recyclability cycle.
Sounds like exciting work. You aware of other programs or other doing similar work around the world?
Around the world, yes. In Australia, no. So we kind of take pride in that. There's other SIP participants in our program that we are with Melbourne University. They probably haven't taken the challenge that we have, and I mean, there's a reason why. For a small organization, that comes at a cost. We do get support from the government as well. So we are in the tax incentive R&D program, and the Melbourne University also participates. So it's kind of collecting funding from all parts to be able to sustain this program. What I like to see in the future is that all the other SIPs manufacturers would start to kind of work to the same goal, where we try to put together a standard that industry can adopt, so that all SIPs manufacturers can contribute with the testing that we all do independently, so that we start working collaboratively than working in isolation.
Really enjoyed your presentation, or the presentation about your product, and there's quite a lot of technical detail. How did you find the rest of the conference?
It was very good, actually. There's a lot of great content. I think, year to year you see how people are starting to take Passivhaus to different levels. I quite like the build-to-rent model that is becoming more and more popular each year. Yeah. Passivhaus has great benefits in domestic application, in standalone dwellings and small-scale dwellings, but it needs to be taken seriously to a level where it's commercialized to higher scales. Yeah. It's so much easier to achieve Passivhaus in commercial space than in the small residential space. And I like to see that there's a lot more examples of that kind coming in every year. Yeah.
And finally, wrapping up this episode, Lyndon Thornley is an architect and certified Passivhaus designer dedicated to regenerative and climate-conscious design. Operating his own studio, Lyndon applies a holistic and collaborative approach that respects both people and place. He's a strong advocate for Passivhaus as a key tool in providing better outcomes for his clients.
Lyndon Thornley, architect in Sydney and Passivhaus designer. I also chair the Australian Passivhaus Association Retrofit Committee.
Yeah. I think others will be interested that there is such a thing as a retrofit committee. What was the purpose of that?
Look, it was a opportunity to bring together a group of us across Australia from cross disciplines, so builders, designers, and consultants, and sort of try and both share the collective knowledge that many of us have in trying to undertake benefit and retrofit projects. But also to, it was something that a few years ago, people told us it's too hard and you shouldn't really bother try.
Right.
And now that we've done it a few times, it's actually proven that it's easy enough to do.
Yeah.
And each time we do it, we get more and more confident about how we do it. And it's just about having the right mix of tools to make it happen. So we need to share that. We need to give others the confidence to try it. And we also need to educate the broader public on the fact that it's possible so that they can ask for it.
Yeah. How did you find the conference?
I always find coming to the conference really energizing. As an architect, we don't get to go to many things that are multidisciplinary. And the breadth of the people that attend this conference really open your eyes to what is happening beyond architecture.
Yeah.
I think it was really exciting to see Ben Kane talk about his Steiner School. I think Passivhaus is really complementary to Steiner ethos and education and a soft approach to the built environment and how you facilitate really good learning.
Yeah.
I think Pablo's story of being questioned about the performance of his building and how he responded to that, also really exciting and really tallies with my experience of completed projects and kind of working out how they operate. And it does take a bit of courage to listen to someone's critique and then to analyze it and learn from it and work out what you do better with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
In the bigger picture, to see what is happening over in the States and the idea that there are all these massive projects and projects now spreading across the globe, even into places like Sri Lanka, is also really, really exciting. So yeah, for me, this year has been about a maturity of the Passivhaus Association here and the idea that we do actually think big and that it applies to all types of projects and all scales.
Yeah.
And it's about how we communicate the value in what we know in a bite-sized and easy to digest way.
Yeah.
To the broader community so that we actually get that opportunity.
Yeah. What type of work do you typically do in your practice?
So we're in a Sydney base, so we are typically being asked to help people to renovate their existing, often quite average colonial buildings, so terrace houses and Californian bungalows, usually fairly damp, fairly cold, very leaky.
Yeah.
Passive house or NFIT is not always possible, whether that's budget or what we're starting with, but what is always possible is the ability to sit down, analyze that existing building, use the Passivhaus tools to inform decisions about how we improve them.
Yeah.
And when we couple that with capable builders who understand how to renovate these buildings, then we can pick some really capable approaches and really, really improve those buildings. So that's a lot of what we do.
Do you find that there's a market in the consumer space for NFIT and that really higher level of performance when you're doing retrofits?
Yeah, look, it's certainly appreciated. I think I don't think I have a client who wouldn't want it. It's more about whether or not it's realistically possible in the suite of constraints that we have, but we would always start with the idea that it's possible.
Right.
And hopefully by the end it's happened.
Is it genuinely something that they are aware of, or are you having to tell them that it exists?
Increasingly people are coming to us asking for Passivhaus, which is a huge change in the past 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
It's no longer something that we have to explain as beneficial. It's whether or not it's possible.
Right.
I think often you see people who they're uncomfortable in their home, they have a limited spend, and they're trying to work out what's the most that they can do with what they've got.
Right.
And so I feel like if I can engage with that problem and think about it creatively, then we can often try and get some really good results.
Yeah. You mentioned about communication, about some of the topics that have come up. Are there specific things that you've taken away from the conference that you probably implement or made you think about doing things differently?
For me, because we work on primarily houses, the really interesting thing to see is how the bigger practices on the bigger projects are building the business case around Passivhaus and demonstrating its value on a cost-benefit basis. It's something that I would like to work out how to do at a smaller scale as well.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a really powerful tool. Like we're usually seeing the idea that, investment in additional materials and performance pays off in reasonably okay time periods, and particularly with sort of significantly cheaper solar PV and battery programs now, the time frames around things are coming down, and it's actually worthwhile having that discussion.
I've just come back from field trip, see the community centre Passivhaus project. What do you think of that?
This was a project that I wasn't aware of until last year's conference, and absolutely blew my mind that we had a local council who was going to undertake a project like this to do a cultural centre, library and auditorium at this level of performance. It's something that the pictures are absolutely beautiful, but to go and see it on a sunny day just made the building sing. And the thing that I really took away from being in the space was how it's clearly become a bit of a community living room. There are people that I overheard discussing that they come almost every day. And
people in the general public that were there.
General public that they come every day and they have their special spot that they like to come and sit. And they've got whether it's doing a puzzle or using the internet or reading a book, they've got a warm space to come to and enjoy. And that's a very special thing about that project.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Well, that's it for this special episode from the Thrive Passivhaus Conference in Melbourne. And a big thanks to all the guests who shared their time, insights and passion for better buildings. I also want to acknowledge Andy Marlowe and Talina Edwards from Envirotecture, who encouraged and made it possible for me to attend this year's conference, including arranging accommodation in the fantastic Passivhaus certified hotel in Melbourne. If you'd like to learn more about any of the people who you heard from today, you'll find links to their LinkedIn profiles and company websites in the show notes. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone in your network who's curious about Passivhaus or working towards more sustainable building outcomes.